What's up everybody, Ted Forbes here from The Art of Photography, and in this video we are going to check out the 4K video recording capabilities of the Panasonic Lumix GX85. In the last video I did an overview of the GX85 as a stills camera, and if you are more interested in that I will link that up in the show description. But in this video we're going to separate this out and look at just the 4K video recording, and I think that's important to do because there's a lot that goes into this. I am recording this video right now in 4K, all my examples will be in 4K. Right now I am recording with the Sony RX100 Mk IV, which it's a compact, but it does 4K. And in a couple scenarios, I've done a lot of test footage, but I will compare this to the Sony a6300 a couple times. And the reason I'm going to do that, I know that the Sonys are slightly more expensive. They're roughly in the same bracket. But one of the things that really got me excited about the GX85 when it was announced is that, first of all, the price point is just under $800 US, which is incredible. For that, you get the body and the kit lens. Apparently it does not overheat when recording 4K video. You can get up to 29 minutes. And the highlight of the camera, which you're going to see in the test footage, is the 5-axis in-body image stabilization. Now, what's interesting is the Sony a6300 does not have in-body image stabilization. You have to rely on optical if you have a lens that supports it. And so I think that's an interesting difference. The Sony also has an overheating problem. This one doesn't. It's also important to remember that there's a lot of variables that go into recording video, and all three of these cameras actually have different sensor sizes. The a6300 is an APS-C size sensor, the Panasonic Lumix is a micro 4/3, and the one I'm recording on right now is a little 1-inch sensor because it's a compact camera. But Panasonic have done a lot with video in the last couple years, and I think, the big break for them was when they released the GH4, which set a whole new standard for video production. Now, it's a micro 4/3 camera, and it wasn't the greatest low light performance, but it shot 10-bit video, which is a big deal. Most cameras are 8-bit. In fact, sadly, this one's 8-bit as well. Most people are not going to realize that they're not going to notice the difference between 8-bit and 10-bit. It comes in handy if you're doing something that's really critical for color accuracy, like green screen if you're trying to key something out. I don't do a lot of that, but what excited me about this was the form factor. This was not an SLR size. It's a lot more compact, and a lot of what they were saying was going to do with 4K video. So I think this is a good time. Let's move over and check out some of the footage they shot. So in this first scenario of test footage, I just went down to the park, and it's a bright, sunny, hot Texas day outside, and I just did some shooting, and as you can see, the 4K video looks really beautiful. The big highlight for me is the in-body image stabilization. Now, I'm hand-holding just about all of these shots, and you can see that it is absolutely smooth. It is really nice, and if you do a lot of hand-holding, you're able to do things with this camera that just don't look as nice on other cameras that don't have that feature. A couple people had asked me if I could look at the Lumix GX85 as possibilities for using it as a vlogging camera. And there are some pros and cons to using this for vlog style stuff. I actually was very interested in that because when I travel, I tend to do a lot of behind the scenes in the more type of vlog format as well. The 5-axis image stabilization is what really caught my attention, and the ability to record in 4K. So there is good news and bad news when it comes to using this as a vlogging camera. Right now I'm hand holding, but I'm using the Joby GorillaPod, and that's one of the good things is the picture looks good. The image stabilization is absolutely fantastic. Now here's the bad news. First of all is the audio. The inbuilt mics on this camera are about the worst I've ever heard in my entire life. They are just junk. And to make matters worse, there is no microphone input jack, so you're just kind of crippled to have to using something else. The other thing that is a little off-putting about this is I am using the kit lens, which is all the way wide at 12 millimeters. Now, there is a crop factor on the 4K, so it's actually cropping in on the sensor a little bit, so you're getting probably not 24 millimeters, it's probably a little higher than that. So when I actually handhold this, it could still be done. I'm just using, my hand is on the camera now. It's just a little close to my face, and I'd like it to be a little further away. Now, you can fix that by using a wide-angle lens, but the trick there is finding a lens that's going to have image stabilization built into the lens, because the 5-axis works in tandem with the lens. Now, you'll still be able to use the in-body image stabilization, but I have no way of testing that right now. I don't know whether it's going to stay this smooth. Right now, we're recording in the shade, but we are in very bright daylight here. And one thing that I was a little disappointed in with the Lumix GX85's 4K capabilities was low light performance. So we're going to go back to the studio and check that out. For this next setup, I've moved indoors and I'm in my living room right now, and I've got a window over on my right, and so I'm lit only by window light. And this is kind of a challenging situation for really any camera because of the dynamic range and the fact that it's pretty high contrast, and I've only really lit half my face here. So anyway, I've noticed that as much as I like the way the GX85 meters, those highlights blow really quickly, and this is one of those situations where half my face was blown out the first couple times I went through. So I backed off the exposure considerably. I'm at the base ISO of the camera, which is 200, and then I have the settings at the shutter speed is 1/50th of a second and the f-stop is 3.5. And even in this scenario, if you compare this to the Sony RX100 Mk IV, which is a compact camera with a 1-inch sensor, I still think it gets outperformed. The Sony RX100 Mk IV just does better with skin tones, with localized details, and it just handles that contrast a lot better. Now, there are other settings that you can play with the GX85. I've set kind of everything up for all these tests just to be in their standard color profile. This is a situation where a log profile would be particularly useful, and the GX85 just doesn't have one. I have one on the RX100 Mk IV. I'm not using it right now, but it is capable of S-Log 2. And again, if you want log profiles, you're going to have to spend more money and get the GH4. So we're back in my office/studio now, and if you follow the show, you know I record in here quite a bit. I'm particularly disappointed in the performance on the Panasonic in here. Now this is low light, but it's not no light, and I've set both cameras up the same, and just to give you a comparison, if I switched over to the Sony a6300, there is a massive difference. The way skin tones are rendered, dynamic range, localized contrast, all these things I've been talking about, Sony just have right in their cameras. The Lumix GX85 is just disappointing in this regard. The other thing that I'm noticing when I'm playing back my test footage on here is there's a lot of drift in the focus, and it's doing facial recognition right now, as is the Sony. The Sony locks on. This hunts and seeks a little bit. Now I do have the lighting on the camera shelf over there, and it kind of wants to light that up sometimes, but I'm just not impressed with it. One thing that would help dramatically with this is if they put an articulating screen on the camera. Now, I know not everybody shoots themselves talking, but that's something that would be very beneficial to me, and I don't know why cameras don't just include that. But anyway, between the two, it's just the performance is not good. The ISO is set at 500, so that's not really exactly pushing it, and you don't see noise in here. It's just not as good an image as I think it should be. And I really had high hopes for this camera, so it's a little bit disappointing. ISO is set at 500. I have LED light bulbs in here, and so I set the white balance manually to match, and so it's at 4900K. And then the shutter speed is 1/50th, and the f-stop is 3.5 on both cameras, and it's just, there's such a dramatic difference between the two. And you know what this really accentuates for me is that it seems like on this level with this particular product line, so whether this is, you know, kind of this sub DSLR mirrorless kind of area, and they book these cameras as being hybrids that can do stills and video, and that is my big attraction to them, because I want to be able to use one camera to switch back and forth between the two. What makes it difficult is it seems like there's always a trade-off, and it's one thing you have to give up to get another thing. For instance, the Panasonic does not have the overheating problem that the Sonys do. And I recorded like a minute of footage, one of the first tests I did, just to see if there was any difference in file size, and there's not. They were both the same size for the most part. So I know it's not that. And so what this is telling me is, obviously the cameras are using different sensors and different processors. Panasonic is more efficient in the way it writes to the card. Sony actually require you to buy really fast cards. You have to get, I believe it's a Class 10 U3 is what it's required for 4K. And even then it starts overheating. So the processor's having to push harder or something in the Sony, and it's probably catching up in that buffer write time or something like that. I'm not an engineer. I don't know enough about how it works. I'm just trying to figure out what it is. But if you want to be able to record longer clips and you're not as concerned about your quality, you're not concerned about audio at all, obviously, then the Panasonic's probably the way to go for something like that. But I just think I expect better performance even from a Micro Four Thirds camera in this day and age. Image stabilization is clearly the key feature of the GX85, that probably combined with the price point. Unfortunately for me, there's just too many other things that fall short, and I feel like in some ways Panasonic's kind of crippled this camera a little bit. The lack of any kind of audio control on this or microphone input would have been really nice and made it usable. Right now you have to come up with a lavalier system and record audio separately, which may or may not be a big deal to some people. But I think also the poor dynamic range, the poor low light performance, the drifting autofocus, those are things that just for me do not make it something something that I would consider using, just because I think it would frustrate me more than anything else. A few of those things Panasonic could have done something about. For instance, dynamic range. If they built log profiles in here like they have even on the G7, which shoots pretty decent video, a lot better than this camera, which is odd because they use the same sensor. But I think Panasonic, because they didn't include those, that there's a possibility that they may be protecting other cameras in their lineup, like the GH4. So for me, it's just not something I'm going to consider using moving forward. Now, having said that, though, I have a friend who's got one of these, my friend Chris, and you might recognize her from the comments, Chris Prowse. She has a vlog channel that she does, and she does a lot of outdoor stuff. And I'm going to link up to one of the videos that she's done with her GX85, because she actually has done some outstanding work with it, and she combines the GX85 with a motorized gimbal, and some of that stuff just looks like a steady cam. It's just amazing, and I think she has an excellent eye. She does excellent work, and so I'm going to link up to her in the show description, and so please check her out. If you're really dead set on finding a camera that can do stills and, let's say, 4K video, and you haven't found something that you're really happy with, and Sony is not the route, I would recommend two things. First of all, Fuji just announced the X-T2, which is going to come out in a little less than 2 months. I have not seen it, and I have not had a chance to use it, but I am very interested because video seems like it's always been an afterthought with Fuji. It has video on the cameras, but it just not is up to the level it should be. I don't think that's the case with this camera. It looks like they've actually really put a lot of thought into it and are dedicated to moving forward and competing in that space. So that's a possibility. And the other thing too, and there are a lot of rumors on this, but Panasonic at some point will have the GH5, or whatever they call the successor to the GH4. And if you look at the GH4 and how that really did change Micro Four Thirds in the fact you could use it for video. I mean, that was a really groundbreaking camera. And if you could just find a way to improve the low light performance on that, and then maybe add that in-body image stabilization, I think you would have probably one of the best DSLR stills video cameras available anywhere. So it'll be interesting to see what Panasonic does with that. They have not announced it yet. It is very much overdue. There are rumors that it'll be out at Photokina this year, so that won't be until the fall. And there's also rumors that Sony's designed the sensor and they're redesigning the processor, and that's the holdup, and who knows if any of this is accurate or not. But it'll be interesting to see what happens, because I think Panasonic, they have game. It's just, it's kind of too much of it's missing in the GX85. So anyway, those are my thoughts. If you guys enjoyed this video, please remember to like it, share it, and subscribe to The Art of Photography so you'll always be up to date on all the videos that I do here. And until the next one, I'll see you guys then. Later.